Randy.
Byron, a couple of things. One, earlier today we talked about the need to include science at the very beginning of the project to, one, define what is the problem, and then two, to be a part of determining the best way to achieve that problem. I assume that, knowing the people that are involved in this particular project, that has happened. But comment on that, and then I've got a follow-up question on the streamlining of permitting.
Okay. Thanks, Randy. Yeah, certainly science has been involved in the ground floor on this, but as Peter mentions, new information comes along. We have this ecological history report that's just come out. That would have been lovely to have 3 years ago. We did a version of that when we were looking at the site originally. It came up, and you do have to be opportunistic in terms of, we've been involved in the cow-fed ecosystem restoration program from the ground floor 10 plus years ago now. So it's been a lot of thinking on what are the types of habitats we're looking to restore, what's good, what areas are good, what are not. We're now getting much more granular, much more educated as a kind of a scientific community on the best spots and then what you can do with it. And Peter's comment about not overforcing based upon the regulatory drivers, which is our real world. We have to recognize we have biological permit requirements that ask for intertidal habitat and seasonal salmon habitat. But that gives us a pretty broad range in terms of definition. And we're seeing a lot of flexibility in terms of the regulators to try to marry up to the understanding of when we get the sites, which were somewhat limited in what we get, what we put in place needs to both meet the regulatory requirements, but meet kind of the overall broad ecological goals to create that mosaic and not try to force everything we might need on a given site. And that we're going to pick up these things when we do a number of different sites across the Delta. So our scientific knowledge has evolved as we have pursued this process. But we started with looking at the historical ecology, going back and getting all the historical topo maps and what was there before, where is this land in the ecosystem, how does it function, what are the functions we're trying to create in terms of creating both fish refuge habitat and rearing habitat and food supply to the system. So all of that was built in. We hired the best restoration ecologists we could at the time, but there's more people. You guys didn't exist, a couple of years ago. So there's more people that want to come in and see what we've done. So we're willing to go through that. At a certain point, we've got to realize, perfect's the enemy of good. We're always going to learn more. We need to get out. All of these are experiments when it gets down to it. And so we're spending a lot of time with the agencies on doing a monitoring design that teaches us out of this and makes then the next project better. So at a certain point, we have to put pen down and go, okay, time to turn in your exams. Let's get going. We actually need some projects on the ground to learn from and recognize that we're going to learn from them, and hopefully we set up our adaptive management program so that we can go in and perhaps modify these in the future, not have designed it in a way that is working against nature. It's rather working with it. Recognizing where we're going with sea level. That was a big part of this site in our design. We recognized it's a site that's right at the margin now. It's got land to the north that can accommodate sea level rise, so we don't have any hard structures that just going to make it go underwater someday. So a lot of that thinking has been built into it. But a lot of the folks who are interested in guiding the overall pattern of ecosystem restoration weren't here a couple of 3 years ago when we started it. So we're trying to balance getting the new information in it, but yet meeting our regulatory requirements and guidelines that are real out there. Now those can change. There'll be a feedback loop to the BIOPS, and hopefully we'll have learned from these first few restoration projects we do so that we can end up with a kind of system that we all want ecologically and really meet the restoration goal in a large scale as well as the small scale by the sites, constraints you've got with the sites you choose.
Another thing we talked about this morning was the legislature anticipated that once the Delta Plan is approved and operable, there's going to be a need to coordinate activities among the many agencies that have authority in the Delta. And therefore, an interagency coordinating committee is going to be put together. One of the goals of that will be to try and find ways to better coordinate the activities between agencies and how to better streamline permitting processes to reduce the amount of time it takes to go from concept to application or implementation. In your experience thus far, do you have any ideas, and I'm not asking for a list now, I'll ask for a list later, but have you already identified areas that could be streamlined, that could have made this process go better and still achieve the same results?
Well, it's a great point, and we've frankly been working on the engine on that point while it's running. And we've created some new ones. We created collectively between us and the fishery agencies what's called the FAST team, the Fishery Agencies Strategy Team, I think it's called. And it's basically an MOA between contractors and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Department of Fish, Game, and Reclamation that is sort of a one-stop shop in terms of what's a creditable project under the biological opinion. So each of the agencies is assigned key point people to, they're the go-to group. They will collectively decide, yes, this project meets the BOs, and here's your credit based on that design. They are all fed by all the folks that we work with on a day-to-day basis. And there's a whole bunch of coordinating committees on habitat, perhaps too many in my mind. I think we need to consolidate a few. We have a regular monthly meeting with DWR, who's got the fish restoration program, where we coordinate all our projects. And we've got 4,000 acres of kind of in production right now in various stages of planning and permitting. We need to get to 8. So we all talk about that, and we talk together about, where are we going to go next, what might come up, what could we potentially acquire. So we've got a whole bunch of projects in the pipeline, and now a lot of folks coming into that process, and Fish and Game is part of that group, helping us decide where and when and how. There's certainly a coordination role of both the Stewardship Council and particularly the Delta Conservancy, which was created to be potentially a long-term land manager and holder of restored lands. We see them as probably not the client for this one, but we're engaged in the McCormick-Williamson Ranch Restoration Project too. That one looks like it might be a prime opportunity for them to be the stewards of long-term. So we're in discussions with them on that. Right now, though, they can serve a real critical coordination role. So back to the permit consolidation. We've created a new version of that, consolidated the sort of the 3 agencies that have to give the blessing on the biological impact. Part of their function is also to coordinate with the other federal agencies like the Corps of Engineers and Flood Board and so forth on the state side, and help make sure that we all get the same kind of collective basic information that everybody's going to need to do their permit action. So we have taken some actions to kind of smooth the permitting process. It takes sophistication to do this. I've been doing this kind of stuff most of my career, and so you just need to identify where you need to go and get the dependencies lined up and get a good team. It's expensive, it's laborious, but I think we've got a lot of goodwill. A lot of people want to see this go, but there's always going to be detail come up because the Delta's a really complex place. I've done a couple of 3 restoration projects in Southern California earlier in my career. They were simple compared to this stuff by far. It was amazing. But we got those done quickly, so they're doable. The permit system's laborious. They're all there for a reason. You just have to take it on and plan for it and coordinate and put enough resources of knowledgeable people to it. I think the real key here, and this is where the council and Peter and others come in, we need to create a system that we've got the communication now that there are new players on the scene at sort of the early level of thinking when we've got a site and what we might want to do with it. And we have learned from this project. We've got another one down in Sassoon Marsh called the Thule Red Project. And now that we've got some new institutions and there's a new group that's going to be reviewing all the stuff down in Sassoon Marsh, we're starting very early with them on design concepts. We didn't have kind of these people to talk to at the beginning of this project, and they all exist now, and we're talking to them. But we're now learning from that and getting them all in, the biologists at the ground floor to figure out, in the grand scheme of things, what's the best function, what would we do with this site? We picked it, we know it's the right location, it's great tidal habitat, it wants to be marsh again. But there's always different ways you can do it. So building that in at the front end will help us down at the long run. They all get enthusiastic about it. It helps the permit process go faster. There's probably individual ways to consolidate some of this stuff. You can try to do core stuff under nationwide permit. Sometimes it's actually faster to get a general permit, and that's the conclusion we've had here, rather than try to fit it into a nationwide format. My difficulty has not really been the permit process so much. It's been coming up with a final design that both that satisfies my landowner entity, the folks in surrounding, and meets the kind of biological goals. And that's been a bit of a moving target. We are into the throes of the permit process now, and then we'll probably be, find some torture chambers there as well, but we'll get through them.
Don, anything? Cliff? Chris?
Nope.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you very much. A very useful and helpful discussion. We appreciate it. Get the project done before we pass the Delta plan, then you won't have to worry about us, Mr. Pokrovich.
You guys are easy. Just a letter.
All right.